About a year ago, Jeremy Piven, the star of Entourage and avid sushi eater, was forced to take a break from work when it was discovered Piven had mercury toxicity. Sushi and other factors could have caused the problem. A recent U.S. geological survey found mercury contamination is a widespread problem in our lakes and streams, tainting our fish and could cause us to become sick. The numbers are staggering. 291 streams tested. Every fish sampled had mercury present. 25% of the fish contain mercury, exceeding the levels that are safe for human consumption based on people that consume average amounts of fish. More than 2/3 of the fish exceeded the U.S. EPA level of concern for fish-eating mammals. Joining me now is one of the lead researchers in the study, Mark Brigham. Mark, can you break down this study for us? What did you do and where exactly did you do it?
Well, we sampled about 300 streams from across the United States for mercury and methylmercury in stream water, stream bed sediment, and fish. And fish is how people mostly get their mercury through consumption of fish, so that's what I'll focus mostly on today.
So where were some of the highest levels of mercury that you found?
Well, we did find quite a wide range in mercury concentrations in the fish. Some of the highest levels were found, not surprisingly, in areas that had fairly high sources of mercury from historical mining of both mercury and mining of gold. Gold mining historically used mercury to extract the gold, so both of those areas had fairly high levels of methylmercury and total mercury in the fish. Another area of the country that we had high mercury levels in the fish was in the southeastern United States and other parts of the eastern U.S. Streams that drained areas with a lot of wetlands tended to have a lot of mercury in the fish.
Were you surprised by these findings? They seem pretty high.
We were not too surprised. Mercury is a widespread contaminant. There's fish consumption advisories currently in 48 of the 50 states in the U.S., so we've known mercury is an issue for some time now. I think what was a little bit surprising were some of these areas, particularly in the southeastern United States, streams that drain a very high density of wetlands, had fish with just as high mercury levels in them as streams in the western U.S. that had really high contamination from historical mining activities. And these streams in the east, I should say, there's no obvious source of mercury contamination to them. They get their mercury primarily from atmospheric deposition. Mercury gets emitted to the atmosphere from a variety of industrial sources, coal combustion being a leading source. So no obvious sources of industrial pollution or mining activity, and yet they had just as high mercury concentrations in them as some of the highly contaminated streams from the western U.S. from historical mining.
Now, we know mercury is toxic, but how exactly does it affect humans?
How does it affect humans? Well, it's a neurotoxin, so it's bad for people's brains, particularly brains that are developing. So both prenatally and young children can have impaired brain development when they're exposed to high levels of methylmercury. Adults are somewhat less sensitive, but they still are sensitive to methylmercury exposure through consumption of fish. And a variety of symptoms have been described, ranging from numbness of the extremities to lack of mental concentration, mental fatigue, those types of symptoms. So it's a central nervous system toxicant.
So what can we do to lower these mercury contamination numbers in our lakes, rivers, and streams?
That's a good question. There's really two levels of things. First, at the governmental level, the government has taken some action in the past. We've gotten mercury out of a lot of products and a lot of industrial processes. Secondly, in the U.S., the federal government is considering ways to reduce mercury emission from coal-fired power plants, which again is the largest source of mercury emissions at present. They're currently considering how to regulate mercury under the Clean Air Act. So that's at the government level. At the personal level, there are things you can do. Mercury is a very common, historically a common item. We had mercury thermometers in our home. So if people have things like mercury thermometers or other products that contain mercury, they should contact their local hazardous waste collection facility and dispose of that stuff properly so it doesn't get out into the environment. Another common product these days that has mercury in it is compact fluorescent lights or other, the tube kind of fluorescent lights. They both have mercury. And again, people should dispose of those things properly, not just throw them in the garbage. So we want to keep the mercury out of the waste stream, and that'll help keep it out of the fish ultimately.
Now, is there a test kit out there that can tell anglers that a certain fish is contaminated?
No, there's really not a test kit. It requires some laboratory equipment, and it's just not conducive to taking it out into the field to analyze fish in the field. However, there are some visual cues that anglers can use. One is just knowing their state's fish consumption advisories. They'll know which species of fish tend to have higher mercury levels, and typically those are the predatory fish, fish that eat other fish for their diet. So things like bass, pike, walleye, those all have comparatively high levels of mercury compared to panfish or trout, things that eat aquatic insects are much lower in mercury typically than the more predatory fish. Secondly, if you do fish for the predatory fish, the bass and the walleye and so forth, larger fish accumulate more mercury. So this is one case where throwing back the trophy fish and keeping the small to medium-sized fish can actually help you reduce your exposure to mercury. One more visual cue that anglers can use is the color of the water. We've found, and other studies have also found, that methyl mercury in water and in the fish that inhabit those waters is strongly related to the color. So I'm talking about kind of the dark-colored, tea-stained lakes and rivers that drain a high density of wetlands. Certain types of wetlands are very active at converting the inorganic mercury, which falls from the sky, into methyl mercury, which is the form that gets taken up by the fish, and that's the toxic form that we're worried about. So, for example, if I were planning a week-long trip to the Boundary Waters canoe area and I was going to fish every day, I'd probably want to consume more of my fish from the really clear, uncolored lakes and minimize my exposure to fish that come from the dark, tea-stained colored lakes that exist up in that region.
So if there was a message in the findings of the survey, what exactly is it?
Well, I think twofold. One is that mercury is a widespread contaminant, and secondly, the mercury levels in the fish vary considerably depending on what environment you're in. So check with your state agencies, your state health departments, because there's very good, detailed information in those fish consumption advisories on which species, which geographic regions in your state or your area have higher mercury. And so just, we don't want to scare people from eating fish. Fish has a variety of nutritional benefits, but we do want to minimize the exposures. So again, pay attention to those fish consumption advisories that the states or provincial governments are putting out.
Mark, thanks for joining us here on WFN News.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.